on the podium, that's never a problem for me. I'm usually adjusting the microphone downwards. So just to Des, the committee, the Human Rights Commission, and indeed the faculty here, I would like to express my appreciation for indeed the invitation to open what I believe will not just be an interesting conference, will be a conference that will yield enormous results, because it is an area that needs to have the type of scrutiny that's going to take place at this conference. It's a very complex area. But before I finish with the formalities, could I just say that I see in the audience a former TD, James Breen from Clare, and James, haven't seen you since the last election, and you're very welcome, lovely to see you. And indeed, I believe that Senator David Culhane is also here, and if I miss anyone else, I'm very sorry about that, but those are the only two people that I did see. And it's nice to see that you would have the type of interest that would in fact bring people from different political arenas to listen to what's been said today, because they're influential people, and at the end of the day this is something that will have to be tackled at a political level. It's a very complex area, it's a very difficult area, and I think that if you were to listen to Des's outline of the two cases that he very briefly outlined, you will see the complexity that there is. And we had our own case, of course, quite recently, where a gentleman who was employed as a chef and went before the labour courts and was awarded €92,000, I believe, as a result of being underpaid and being very poorly treated. And I think everyone in the country really was cheering for him, because this type of exploitation needs to be stamped out, and someone that has the courage to step forward and actually expose themselves, and when they are so readily identifiable within a smaller group of people, I think that takes enormous courage. It takes enormous courage. But the employer appealed to the High Court, and the justice that took it in that case, I would have huge respect for, Adrian Hardiman, and overturned the decision, because he didn't have a valid work permit and he was being employed illegally. And unfortunately, the protections that we have in relation to employment law could not be applied to him because he was being employed illegally. And it was very clear that the employer benefited from that type of gaping hole, and I'm loath to call it a loophole, that type of gaping hole in the law. Simply benefited from it. And those are the types of questions that we're going to have to take a serious look at. And it is very difficult, especially when you talk about domestic work, which is hidden, which is indoors, which is not very visible. And, most of us, and I know that there are representatives here as well from different unions and different big employers. And, it's difficult for us to actually stop and check to see, for instance, if the people that are cleaning the corridors of Dáil Éireann have the protection that the state insists that the rest of our workers have. You would ask yourself that question, and you need to step back sometimes from the hedge and take a look at what's over it. Sometimes we become blinded to the fact that we put in place laws and we have protections. But are we sure that they're being applied across the board? And are we sure that they protect everyone? And this is an issue that Ireland has only had to deal with recently. We were a very insular state. We were a state that did not have people from the outside come, not just to visit us, but they didn't come to live here, and they definitely didn't come to work. That has changed dramatically. And our response has to be as urgent as the circumstances changing will be. With the ILO Convention on Decent Work for Domestic Workers, which the Department of Social Protection took part in, and we're very happy to take part in, and there is enormous work being done within that department, and as soon as that work is completed, we will in fact see whether or not we can ratify, and whether or not we have done enough to ensure that we ratify in relation to that protection. But that work has to be done. But because workers work across departments, There is also a piece here for instance, jobs, enterprise and skills. What part do they have to play in all of this? And that's a different department. And I often think that in my own area of disability, that the kind of cross-departmental piece that needs to happen is missing. It's missing. We often talk about needing budgets to be in silos in order to keep track of them and everything else, but departments work in silos and they don't often interact in the way they need to interact. And we have a difficulty here. We have a difficulty that will need all of us collectively to take a serious look at how we address this issue. And the panel of speakers you have will be most enlightening in this whole area. I was talking last night to Maria, for instance, and she tells me that she's not just dealing in terms of judiciary, she's talking in terms of politicians and a whole range of people, because it is that piece, it is about that cross-cutting piece that we need to take a look at. But above all else, we need to be conscious of the fact that when people step forward and when they have the courage to expose themselves, that we are there as a state and as individuals and as different organisations working in the migrant domestic worker area, that we are there to give support and protection. Support and protection. And that is very important, very important. It's very difficult for people to step outside the comfort zone. Even those of us who are extraordinarily comfortable, it's difficult for us to step outside that zone. How more difficult must it be when you are totally dependent on the person you are working for? That you are totally subjugated in relation to that particular environment? How more difficult is it when that person holds your travel documents, when they have allowed your work permit to elapse and will not allow you to go and have it renewed? How more difficult is it when the miserly pay that is being paid is all your family has to live on in their own country, and the guilt that's attached to giving up that meagre employment? So it's a complex area, it's a wide-ranging area, but it's an area that we have no choice other than to tackle. And we've tackled other difficult areas in our time, and we've been good at it. And Ireland does have a reputation abroad that I think is worth enhancing, and it is a reputation that others will listen to. But we cannot allow this type of exploitation to continue under our noses, and sometimes I believe it is under our noses. We need to take a look at big institutions. How are they managing the people that come in on contract work to carry out various functions for them? Now, I think the only people that we will have truly control over will be people that are funded by the state. But legislation, if it is robust enough, and legislation, if it is known widely, will in fact give people a degree of comfort and will give them the courage to step forward. So there's a friend of mine that when he was getting me ready for oh, that's me, sorry, I didn't realise that. Yep, that's me again. Des, that was you as well. There's a friend of mine that when he used to get me ready for appearances on television and radio, he used to come in and he used to put all the papers on the ground, and he used to ask me questions, not just about the various topics of the day, but indeed he'd often ask me questions about the small ads just to see was I genned up enough, and he'd go through it, and as he left he would gather all the papers into a ball and he would turn around and he'd say to me, I have every faith in you. What he was really saying was, you're on your own. And sometimes that's exactly how I felt, and I think that's how some migrant workers feel as well. I hope that we can give them the type of support and encouragement that they need, and that we will be able to put in place a body of law that will give them sufficient protection, the same type of protection that we would expect for our own. Thank you very much.